What's up, guys?
How's it going? Another change of scenery.
Yes, we have a whole new setup over here now.
Yeah, this is, expect this every single week now. We have an empty audience. It's supposed to simulate you guys watching us.
Yeah, totally. None of you.
Oh, none of you. God, it's so pessimistic. Yeah, we're set up today because we have a special premiere we're going to be doing right after this.
We do. So our D&D show has recorded their first couple of episodes, and we're releasing the premiere episode tonight.
Yep, Echoes from the Deep.
Echoes from the Deep. I keep saying that wrong. I keep saying it echoes in the deep, but it's echoes from the deep. So. Well, if you're just joining us for the first time this week, I am Nick the Red. With me, as always, is my partner in crime,
Tyler P. I don't have any fancy colors to go after my name.
You say that every week, and one of these days, I'm just going to call you like T-Money or something.
I hate that.
Until you figure it out. Anyway, this is Beneath the Surface, nerdy podcast between two guys just talking about our hobbies and talking about what life is like inside a game store, which you can see behind me.
Yeah, there's a store. We're going to have a guest joining us a little bit later.
We will. He's running a bit behind, late. But that's okay because we don't really need him for the first part anyway.
Maybe so we're going to talk about a little bit more Magic lore to touch up on some of the new lore.
I am the old school lore guy. This guy to my right, left on screen, is the new lore guy.
It was a lot of stories to read. They call them short stories. They're pretty long for short stories. Each one's a solid probably anywhere from 3K words to like. There was one that I think was like 8 or 9K. Like it was a solid read.
I'm not surprised, but I mean,
It's one of those things. So they always say like, oh, they're short little stories. They publish them. I think every week we get a story normally these days.
Yeah, it's like, but they're like short stories that they release every week now instead of it being like one big full like novella.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like you get a short story, and it takes it. Some of them took me like a solid like 45 minutes to an hour to read through.
Yeah,
at like paying attention, which I mean, that sure is good for a short story, but it was definitely an interesting way to tell lore, and I actually like a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it more accessible.
Yeah, because you don't have to go buy a book anymore. You just log into the Magic website.
See, I'm a bit of a bibliophile. Like I really like having physical books in my hand when I'm reading. I broke my own kind of rule. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite when it came to reading like the Stormlight Archives, only because I love you, Brandon Sanderson. Dear God, you have massive books.
I've heard that.
So I'm currently reading book 5 of the Stormlight Archives, and it is an undertaking. I think on my Kindle, it has probably half of the memory is just Brandon Sanderson books.
That's insane. That's actually just insane. I am on book 0 of the Stormlight Archives.
I would recommend if you're big into like high fantasy, kind of like unique magic systems, unique world, unique universe, because if you didn't know, all of his books are like in the same universe for the most part.
Cosmere.
He did do some writing on like Wheel of Time, and he does have a couple of like standalone novels, and he does have more of a sci-fi series. But his fantasy is like
I've heard
kiss.
It's like
it's on point. Like
I'll probably get to it whenever I reach a stopping point in the Dresden Files, because that's what I've been reading through the most recently.
I've read up to like book 8 of the Dresden Files.
I'm on book 3. Book 2 took me way too long because it just felt really slow.
Well, there's that, and you probably don't have a whole lot of time to do a lot of reading.
That's true. I get a little bit in every
I have
day.
another job, and there are definitely some downtime hours in this other job that I can sit down and just read. And I've gotten through 4 books of the Stormlight Archives and the 3 Mistborn books.
Must be nice.
The first trilogy.
Must be nice.
But anyway.
So Magic Lore.
Magic Lore.
I think we stopped off.
We left off probably right around.
I think it was like Alara. I think we touched on Alara.
We touched on Alara. I think we basically stopped right around because we were bringing most of it up because Tarkir Dragonstorm had come out, right? And so we were talking about like lore leading up to the original Tarkir.
Yes. So we touched a little bit on stuff. So the big things that I was going to hit on, because I remember the last couple novels we got where it was still like a novel.
Yeah.
Was Theros had books.
Did they?
I think Theros had books.
Because Tarkir was the last block that it was the first block that did not have a book.
Yes, because they started doing the web stories with
Right.
original Tarkir.
They started doing the web stories, right?
Because those ones are easy reads. They didn't know what they were doing yet. They were
They're
only like
a couple of paragraphs, and
it was like a quick little ditty,
little stories about side characters and whatnot.
That's because also around the time that they were introducing the story spotlight cards was right around that set.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, this card is like a big highlight for the story. Instead of having to like piece together through 100, 200 plus cards, it's just, hey, there's like 5 cards that
these are the important scenes or the important events and things like that. Especially with Sarkhan showing back up on Tarkir, realizing that Ugin's dead.
Yep.
Goes back in time through time travel shenanigans.
Yeah, because
and ends up saving Ugin.
Yes, during the big Nexus of Fate is the card.
Nexus of Fate is when he went back in time. You're thinking of
Crux of
Fate.
Crux of Fate was the black. It was a removal spell.
Yeah, well, it was a board wipe either for dragons or non-dragons.
Because that was the diverging timeline.
Right. Because what happened was Bolas and Ugin fought. Bolas defeated Ugin,
which destroyed the Dragonstorm.
Which ended the Dragonstorm on Tarkir, which meant that dragons couldn't replenish themselves.
Yeah, and then they were hunted to extinction by the clans.
By the Khans. Yeah. And the various different clans. But that when Ugin went back and Fate Reforged, he had that Hedron with him still.
Yes.
And he used it to save Ugin, basically put him in like a hibernation.
Yep. And allowed him
to recover and heal. But it meant because Ugin didn't die, it meant the Dragonstorm never ended, which means the dragons ended up taking over Tarkir, and that's where we get Dragons of Tarkir.
Yes, and then eventually, way down the line, Dragonstorm Tarkir.
Sure, with the Omen Paths opening up. I think that was what the story was, like what I was hearing online, was that the Omen Paths are allowing dragons to kind of bleed into the rest of the multiverse, and the storm is like reaching out into the rest of the multiverse.
The fastest, if I had to sum up most of the new Magic stories, so everything post, I guess it would be post Phyrexia, would be X is trying to do a thing using the Omen Paths and has to be stopped. That has been the majority of the stories.
It almost feels like they were writing themselves into a corner, threw the Omen Paths in there for a way for them to get out of that corner,
and they found their way into a new corner.
And then now they're writing themselves into another corner.
I'm really hoping with Edges of Eternity they worm their way out.
I have high hopes for that set when it comes out. If only because we're getting Tezzeret coming back.
Yes, as a big bad.
I really hope he's not, though.
Really? You don't want Tezzeret to be a big bad finally?
I feel like he was selfish, right? He was very selfish, very self-centered, very worried about his own self-preservation, right? I get that. That's fine. I see him more as like a neutral evil kind of character, where
he's pretty mustache twirlingly evil.
I mean, yes, but you got to remember he was also a slave to Bolas,
correct,
for the longest time, and basically doing what Bolas told him to do. Otherwise, I'm gonna kill you. Then when he got away from Bolas, the Praetors got their claws into him, and then he basically had to do exactly what the Praetors were telling him to do, or they were going to kill him.
Yeah, because they gave him the Darksteel body.
Right. So, and Jin Kataxis was trying to corrupt that Darksteel and turn it into Blightsteel. So basically making him a Phyrexian agent. And he got away.
Yes.
Before that happened.
Because he was already almost got turned Phyrexian by Vorinclex on Kaldheim. But he managed to narrowly escape that because that's when he made the deal with them, as well as Tybalt, because Tybalt was also working with them.
Tybalt was there working for the Phyrexians.
And Tybalt did get hit by them, and because that's why he showed up way later as a Phyrexian, because he didn't even realize he had been
we didn't
infected.
even get a card for him.
I thought he did get a card.
He showed up in one card.
That's right, and they just made Rakish Instigator again with Phyrexian art, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, that was in the, I think that was in the
Secret Lair.
The Secret Lair.
Yeah.
No, the one is what is the elf Tyvar? Yes, Tyvar's
Tyvar.
Pummeling, I think, is what it was. Tyvar's Pummeling is
Speaking of a guest
Speaking of which,
appears.
Hi there.
Perfect timing.
Dom Wolfe, welcome to the show. How are
Thank you guys for having
doing?
me.
Of course.
I'm doing well. Sorry
Awesome.
I showed up a little late.
You're fine.
Ah, you're fine. We were just
planned
going
for it.
over some like lore and whatnot.
Yeah, talking
But now the meat and potatoes of the actual episode can go off. We're going to be talking with Dom here about 60 card formats because we're really trying to drum up a lot of interest in the 60 card formats in store. So we've had what? Since Foundations, we've had
Aether Drift has come out.
Aether
And
Drift.
recently you added Dragon Storm of Tarkir into the meta. Aether Drift was kind of, as some would say, a flop set. It introduced a few new pieces for some different strategies, namely the 3-mana Chandra, which got introduced into the Oculus Jeskai list. But aside from that, not many cards had actually made it into a lot of the 60-card formats, with the exception of Stock Up. Stock Up has been amazing throughout Standard and in Modern as a card value engine, as a 3-drop slot. So far, Tarkir has added some new tools to different strategies. The Black Dragon Scavenger Regent is being used as a reusable board nuke due to the Omen mechanic.
Okay.
Which gives you a better form of removal in the fact that it gives -X as opposed to your typical destruction.
Right.
effect.
which gets
It's
around a
around
lot of
A
stuff.
lot of things. Indestructible. Mostly that.
Yeah.
Mostly
Mostly that.
indestructible.
It also gives you an option for the menace of the standard format, being mono red mice.
Yes.
So mono red mice, aside from being one of the foremost aggro strategies in standard currently, is also making its way over into Pioneer. The only difference between the standard list and the Pioneer list is really improved mana bases on top of your choice of pump spells.
Right. You have access to so much more in Pioneer because that goes all the way back to Return to Ravnica.
Yes.
So you have access to a bunch of crazy stuff. I mean, like, I know I put together a mono red mice list for Standard before it kind of didn't really take off. And I mean, really in Standard, I only had access to like Turn Inside Out and what was the other one?
Might of the Meek, the
Might of the Meek.
mouse-specific pump spell that
There was
replaced
that
itself.
one. And then the Monstrous
Monstrous Rage.
Monstrous
Yes.
Rage.
Out of
Which
Wilds
is
of Eldraine.
one of the best cards I think they've printed in a while in terms of a pump spell.
I also feel, and there's been several videos out about it online, but the thought of Monstrous Rage being a problem in Standard.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's
I mean,
at this point.
it's basically 3/1 when you drop it. It's instant speed, and you're giving trample on top of it. Like there really hasn't been a pump spell like that in a while.
Yeah.
Yes. And so one of the biggest things that I think Monstrous Rage introduces to the format, and you guess you'd say it's a weakness in an aggro deck, is the ability to block. So you can put out this giant creature, specifically if you want to talk any of the mice where they have prowess or their heroic triggers, where they get large. But if you have the 1/1 blockers as far as like a token strategy, or even like a good death toucher, it fends off the aggro and it lets you stabilize a little bit.
Right.
However, with the introduction of Rage, just giving you the ability to add trample to that equation makes it almost doesn't give you any incentive to block because you're maybe mitigating 1 or 2 points of damage.
Right.
Which
most people only have like those 1/1s, 1/2s, 2/2s.
Well, it's like I'm surprised that because for the longest time before the mice package really started to see a ton of play, it was Slick Shot Show Off. You were playing your Slick Shots, then you were going to hit it with a Monstrous Rage or something, and you were just going in, and it was turn 3 normally with Slick Shot and all of its abilities. You're hitting for I think 6 or 7 damage on one creature.
Seven.
Turn 3.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be 7.
If you're just hitting with it because it has that pseudo prowess, it actually has the ability that prowess used to be when it
Heroic.
first came out.
Yes.
Which is whenever you play a non-creature spell, it got +2 power. Prowess used to just give +2
yes.
power.
Yeah, when they first
When
originally
it first introduced it, and then they were like, "Oh, this is a little too powerful."
Yeah,
Let's
and then
just shift
when it
that
came
1 point
out
over."
as like a full featured in the original Tarkir, that's when they were like,
Yeah.
it's just +1/+1, which is still
But
very
still,
strong,
I mean,
but-
yeah, like you're saying, it starts off with what 2 power normally. It's a 2 power, or it's a 2/2.
Or it's a 2.
I believe it's a
or
1/2.
It's a 1/2 because it trades up.
Yeah. So it's a 1/2. You play Monstrous Rage. You get the prowess trigger, making it a 2/3, and then it's getting that buff, that +3 bump, right off the bat.
And one of the best parts about Slick Shot too, aside from just that +2/+0 instead of a +1/+1, is the plot mechanic that got brought in with Thunder Junction.
Sure.
Because plot a Slick Shot on turn 2, just leave it like it's a known threat that your opponent has to account for with.
It's a loaded gun that you're just leaving there sitting. It's like at any time, whenever I see the lull, just pull it out.
Whenever I have a handful of pump spells.
Yes, and I can just go because it has haste.
Because I can just go boop, 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 put them all into exile, and then just play them for free. Boom, boom, boom. Now I got 3 of them. I play 1 pump spell, all of them get buffed. Play another pump spell, all of them get buffed. Swing for lethal.
And then obviously you already have Monastery Swift Spear in the format, which came back in during Brothers War, so a 1-drop, 1/2 that can swing right off the bat.
Yep.
The card that I actually think out of Tarkir that is kind of adding a little bit of spice to the mono red strategy, which a lot of people already have some hype about, is Corey's Steelcutter. So Corey's Steelcutter got introduced with the flurry mechanics. Whenever you cast your second spell a turn, trigger flurry. So it's a red and 1 artifact that has flurry. When you cast your second spell, create a 1/1 prowess monk. Equip Corey's Steelcutter to it. It gets the stat buff, but as well as trample and haste.
Gross.
So you create a very similar problem that you have with like Monstrous Rage,
right?
Except this effect is repeatable. So
So every time you cast 2 spells, you can, I'm assuming for free,
Yep.
you move the equipment over, and now it's hitting again and again and again, and the prowess is still there. So if you're pumping spells, like Jesus.
Yep, Corey's Steelcutter I definitely think is going to be probably one of the MVPs out of Tarkir. It also mitigates one of the biggest downfalls of an aggro strategy, is eventually your creatures are going to get board nuked, they're going to be removed. Unless you have artifact removal, that Corey's Steelcutter is going to remain. And right now, unless you're playing in green, there's no real solid way to remove artifacts cost effectively.
Cost effectively, yeah. Because there's always a way to get rid of them. It's just, do you want to dedicate that much resource to...
Because that's the real name of the game when it comes to 60 card. Because, you know, in the modern Magic world, most people play 100 card. Yeah, you're playing Commander. A lot of people will spend their entire Magic career and never touch a 60 card format these days, which is weird for, you know, us. We've been playing now for a decent amount of time.
Right.
You know, so when we started, Commander wasn't
around 3
really a thing, right? Or it was just starting to kind of drum up as a format. So people don't understand what efficiency means when you're talking 60 card as opposed to 100 card.
Right. Because yes, you get 4 copies of each card in your up to 4 copies of each card in your deck, which can kind of help guarantee that you're going to draw into it. But
if it doesn't fit curve, if it's not, because again, these are fast formats.
Right.
And for me, because my experience with Magic's a little bit different than yours, I started in Commander about 4 or 5-ish years ago, but I only recently picked up 60 cards maybe in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Right.
And so one of the biggest like gaps is in Commander you've got a starting life total of 40.
Yes.
So when you cut that in half going down to 20, yes, it's a bit easier because you're only focusing on one player.
Right.
But when you talk about like a 1-for-1 trade, sometimes a 1-for-1 trade isn't always the best thing.
No.
Which kind of can segment into the complete polar opposite of what we've talked about with mono red, of just being this aggro strategy, kills you very quickly.
Turns dude sideways, hit him in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Which some people love that. But on the complete opposite end, and it won the most recent Pro Tour for Standard, was Domain Overlords.
Yes. That is a scary deck to look at.
That is what I've been hearing, is that it's a very big boogeyman in the format right now.
And which is funny because, like, especially like as you start looking at tournament results right after the Pro Tour, it seemed like Domain fell off the face of the earth, which none of the cards got banned. There was no new strategy to counteract it. I think it just got to the point, especially after watching that tournament, if you did, watching the Domain mirror match was very taxing, and I don't want to say boring, but it was lackluster.
Right. It wasn't exciting.
But one of the biggest cards in that list that when you talk about making a bad 1-for-1 trade is a Beanstalk. So it's a green enchantment, green and 1. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, which is amazing. You play it for 2, it replaces itself. But everything after that, anytime you cast a spell, CMC 5 or greater, you draw a card for casting it.
Right.
So at that point, when you think about it, one of the best forms of removal in Standard currently is Get Lost, white. White, colorless, instant speed removal for pretty much everything but an artifact.
Yeah.
Right.
The Beanstalk already replaced itself when it came into play. I have to waste a removal spell to kill the Beanstalk. But at that point, it's like, okay, I'm down removal. I can't remove the creature or any other threat you have on the board. And I tapped out for it if I'm on the draw.
Fair. So it's like
Yeah.
you're going down a card to get rid of something that you know will be a problem as they play, but it opens you up. It basically makes you use your bullet.
Yep. And so, aside from the two known boogeymans of the format, some of the lists that I've seen people brewing are kind of leaning more into the mid-range and control strategies. Jeskai has a lot of interesting opportunities. I've seen a few brews around their new 7-drop instant, which sounds completely absurd, but Revelation of the Jeskai. It's kind of a do it all in one spell. It deals 4 damage to your opponent or any target, returns target permanent or spell to its owner's hand. You create 2 1/1 prowess monks, and you draw 2 cards at instant speed.
Yeah, it's just everything. It's just an everything card.
Pretty much everything that you want to do in those colors.
And at instant speed, 7 to do all of that for 7.
It's taking
that makes it playable.
It's taking the place of like 3-4 cards.
Yeah.
Basically, you're paying the amount of mana that you would pay, probably at a discount for getting those same effects. Because at best, you're like you said, you got Get Lost, which is a removal, right? So you've got the 4 damage to any target. There's your removal piece. You've got the counterspell aspect, which in most standard formats is going to be 3 mana.
Yeah, if not a little bit, if not 4.
More. Because they're not going to print two mana counterspells anymore.
No.
And then you get the tokens, which there's plenty of like white effects that make
it's a raise the alarm,
right? It's like a raise the alarm. So you got
with prowess, which makes it just better,
right?
Because they
make themselves bigger.
Yeah. So effectively, for the amount of mana you're spending, you're getting all of the effects that you want that you would spend on 4 cards anyway,
and draw 2 cards.
Right.
That's a thrill of possibility without having to discard. You're not looting it.
Exactly.
So all of that at 7 and instant speed.
And not to mention your mana rocks are getting a little bit better. I don't know if the Mox Jasper is like a seeing play in standard, but just the fact that you have access to mana rocks means that paying 7 mana for it is not outside of the realm of possibility.
Which, like talking rocks, like Hedron Archive recently got reprinted in Foundation, so it taps for 2 colorless. You can play it on turn 4, or if you play in green ramp strategies, maybe turn 3.
Sure.
Aside from that, Mox Jasper, like you mentioned, was introduced in Dragonstorm. The biggest downside to it is you have to control a dragon in order for it to actually tap mana.
Right.
Which some of your best dragons, like Magmatic Hellkite, when it's red dragon, 2 red and 2 colorless, is probably one of the earliest ones that you're going to be able to get into play. And so really you're looking at ramping on turn 4, and that's assuming your dragon sticks around through your next turn.
Yeah.
Now, in Magical Christmas Lands, I can't believe I'm saying this exists in Standard, but there is a turn 1 kill combo.
I was
with
just
Mox
about
Jasper.
to mention that is the fact that Mox Jasper can tap for mana if you have a dragon, and isn't there a ley line that like gives your creatures all your creatures.
It's the green one, right?
It's the blue ley line out of Duskmourn. So the magical hand is you have to have 1 of the blue ley lines out of Duskmourn, 2 of the red ley lines, a Cacophony Scamp, a land, Mox Jasper, and the new 1-drop red spell out of Tarkir, where it gives +3/+0. And
like I said, one of those buff spells that you really don't see very often, because 3 power on a instant speed is a pretty big swing.
Yep. But all of those stars aligning to give you that perfect opening hand on turn 1 can let you win the game.
If it happens, that'll be funny, but it's no different than back in the Kamigawa block, that there was literally a turn 1 kill in Kamigawa in Standard, which was Raging Goblin, a mountain Raging Goblin, and then like 3 Burning Shoals with like the big dragons or something. Like there was like big like a 9-drop and a 10-drop card, the Myojins and whatnot. And basically you just exile the red card from your hand, cast the Burning Shoal, bump it, up that 10 because the Myojin costs like 10, right? So you basically exile it, it gets 10 power and swings in for lethal on turn 1.
Yeah.
So it's basically a repeat of that, but with, a few more moving parts.
Yep.
See, because my big standard, like when I was playing standard the most, and this is pretty much when I really started playing Magic seriously. This was Theros block. So right about when you were seeing a lot of like mono blue devotion lists.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when they had to make the rules about like where you're allowed to have cards because you had a lot of Pro Tour players. They were all putting their Thassa's on top of their libraries, so they would not forget to do their triggers. And they're like, "Yeah, you can't do that." But I mean, it's interesting to hear about the one-turn kills because at least during that time there weren't any like Magical Christmas OTKs,
right?
Or at least ones that saw a lot of like even talk, because everything at that time was like mid-range tempo or even control.
Yeah,
because you're playing the devotion lists. Thoughtseize was back in standard at the time,
which was so gross.
Oh yeah, classic turn one Swamp Thoughtseize.
Yeah,
when
let's
you
go
talk
ahead and just
about
get
a
rid of that
card
one
that-
card that you really wanted to have in your hand.
Yeah, talk about Thoughtseize, a card that is amazing in any 1v1 format,
Yes.
but is horrible in Commander.
And even then, I remember there were even arguments at one time that Thoughtseize wasn't as good as people made it out to be because it is a 1-for-1 at the end of the day. You're trading one card out of your hand to get one card out of their hand, plus the life loss, but you're picking what they're losing.
That, and one of the biggest things like I love about Thoughtseize, and when it's talking about 60 card, black is one of my favorite strategies. And Pioneer, like mono black discard and just hand disruption was my first deck I ever built for Pioneer. Aside from losing 2 life kind of sucks, especially when you only have 20.
Right.
But it takes away a key piece that your opponent wants to play. 2, you know all but 1 card in their hand, especially if you're on the play, so you can play around whatever they have or force them into less optimal trades.
Right.
So information is the name of the game on that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, just speaking on other games, like the ability to make your opponent discard a card on turn 1 after they've already planned out their first couple of turns is such a huge disruption. That's why, like, Spark of Rebellion is so good in, like, Star Wars, because it's literally turn 1, let's go ahead and look at your hand, and I'm going to discard that card that you were saving your resources for, or that you want to play on turn 1, or that card you want to play on turn 2. Let's just go ahead and get rid of it now.
Yeah. And if we're... Oh, sorry.
Well, it's just, it removes your ability to curve out.
Yeah.
Right.
Because a lot of the times when you have your opening 7, you're like, okay, this is my turn 1 play, this is my turn 2 play.
Exactly.
And unless you know the strategy you're going into right off the bat, sometimes disrupting that turn 1 or 2 play completely changes how the game cascades.
Well, yeah, because you're just you're off on the wrong foot from that point, and it's just you're playing catch up. You know, because that's something I was going to say with like say One Piece. If we're talking other TCGs for a second, the One Piece TCG there isn't a lot of hand disruption.
Right.
There are only a handful of cards that exist that do anything to interact with your hand, so you can really see the raw effects of something like that because you're not anticipating it. Like in say Magic, where it's always something kind of keep in the back of your mind, like they could hit me with a Thoughtseize, they could hit me with.
They're in black. They could hit me with a discard.
Inquisition of Kozilek, whatever, you know. Which God, I haven't seen that card in forever, but
great staple.
Mystical
Archive.
But so one of the things too, like, and when you talk about 60 card formats, almost every set, like I can think back to Brothers War, Dreams of Steel and Oil has made a resurgence as far as being a good removal piece. It takes a card out of your opponent's hand and exiles a card out of their graveyard. So it removes resources in 2 ways. You had Intimidation Tactics that came out in Aether Drift, which just is limited to hitting creatures and artifacts, if I remember correctly, but it exiles them instead.
Right. Which is such a bigger hit, especially with decks that have the ability to play things back out of their graveyard.
Yep, and so effects like that get reprinted, I'm not going to say every set, but they get reprinted consistently enough to keep that type of strategy or thought process in mind at all times.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially now with how standard format is kind of rolling out, what is it, 3 years now before things rotate out?
Yep.
So, you know, we're going to be still seeing cards, what is it, from all the way back in Dominaria, Dominaria United?
Dominaria United, Brothers War, I think are the 2 oldest sets that'll be rotating out.
Right.
But
I thought they were going to rotate out when Aether Drift came out, but apparently not.
I believe their rotation doesn't happen until, what, start of next year?
I think it's the end of the year, like November ban list rotation time, I believe. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But so you're looking at a full year of having those cards,
Right.
which eventually you lose some key pieces. Like when you talk about mono red, like you lose Monastery Swiftspear out of
Right.
out of
Brothers
War. But yeah, I definitely think in the introduction of Foundations as kind of a staple set, one with the thought process, like I talked about, all of those different discard spells getting reprinted. Because Foundations is legal for 5 years, it limits the need of reprinting another format of board nuke, reprinting
Right.
a discard spell, reprinting a mana dork like Llanowar Elves.
Yes.
Right.
It frees up those slots for new card.
And that was the thing is, like,
spaces.
back in the day, the core sets were meant to do that. Was that you were gonna have these cards for like a good 2 years, available to you, and then by the time that set rotated out, the next core set was coming out.
Yeah.
And then you'd have those staples, and they were basically just a lot of reprints of those cards that are just these basic cards that you can use for these decks. They're not going to be the biggest Whammadine cards out there, right? They're going to be like mostly your staples that you're going to need to build a deck around. So, like, the fact that it's going to be in standard for 5 years means, like you said, they don't have to reprint, or they don't have to print a bunch of mana dorks. They don't have to print a bunch of discard spells. They don't have to print a bunch of board wipes and things like that in the sets coming out. They can just be like, hey, you've got that stuff in Foundations, just keep using those.
They're going to need to do a reprint of Foundations, because I don't think I've seen a Foundations play booster for a hot minute now.
See, I was under the impression it was going to be like print on demand for
That's
that
what
stuff.
I thought it was too.
Because it's going to be standard legal for 5 years, they're going to need to print them. Maybe not as much, but they are going to need to like print them again and again. Same thing with like collectors and whatnot.
And overall, I'd say some of the most relevant cards out of Foundations, as an elf player, Llanowar Elves getting reprinted, a 1-drop mana dork.
I know you were so happy when you got a hold of the anime foil.
Yep, it's beautiful. But so Llanowar Elves has been reprinted a million times.
Sure.
One of the other big ones, Wrath of God.
Yes.
Being reprinted. Correction, Day of
Day of
Judgment,
Judgment,
not Wrath
which
of
is
God.
basically Wrath of God.
Similar effects.
Yeah.
But aside from that, some of like your more key pieces that fit into strategies, like an offer you can't refuse, resolute reinforcements, some of the cards that are actually getting played out of Foundations have been were printed within like the last year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like offer you can't refuse was New Capenna.
Yeah.
Yep. Which just rotated out and it's already back into standard.
Right.
So
Aether Drift just reintroduced Spell Pierce. Spell
Yes.
Pierce, one of the best counter spells as far as like your early curve.
yes. Another big thing with it is I'm surprised that Wizards didn't jump to make a set like Foundations sooner, because like you were saying with the core sets, they've tried to change it up a handful of times now.
Right.
Whether it's stopping making core sets altogether or they kind of refocus what they're supposed to be. But the big one I always think of is Origins. Because Magic Origins was their take at like, oh, what if a core set wasn't just a core set?
Yeah.
And we saw things like Baby Jace.
Right. Let's introduce new cards
Yes.
instead of it being a 100% reprint set.
Yes.
We're going to introduce new cards that are going to be bringing back a lot of like older mechanics.
Yes.
Because you had things like
there's Baby Jace.
the Girapur, or the Whirler Rogue,
Whirler Rogue,
which had prowess.
Abbot of Care Keep was a big one I remember seeing a lot. Liliana Heretical Healer.
Yep.
Saw a ton of play. Even Kythian, or Kithian, however you want to say it, flipped into Gideon.
Yep.
Yeah. But that was also because Humans was already a big deck at the time. It
Right.
was I think 5-color Humans was the deck.
I
It bounced
honestly
around.
don't
You saw
remember.
5-color, you saw Mardu, because you played Drana from BFZ and a handful of other things, and it just kind of went burr.
And so one of my biggest things with like that mention of like why not do Foundations sooner? Well, we talked about a few years back. Obviously, the pandemic hit. So
Right.
Paper Magic was virtually non-existent.
Yes.
And even like after the come out of like COVID had kind of disappeared, at that point, Commander was really the biggest format that was making Wizards money.
Right.
So until I would say really within the last year to year and a half of Paper Magic coming back in full resurgence, I don't think there was a place for a set like Foundations prior to that.
I would agree with that. Because like you said, like Commander was really like the format that people were really focusing on at the time. You got to think things like Spell Table became so huge during that. Like even I played Spell Table like a lot with just random people. So you could still get your Paper Magic games in, and 90% of the games on Spell Table were Commander games.
Yes.
Because, you get 4 people sitting around a table all bored. Hey, let's play some Magic, over the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
like even in the random Magic Facebook groups that I'm a part of, like I'll get in like one of the random sub chats, hey, on Spell Tables, anyone looking for a game?
Right.
So even
So,
now.
yeah, I could definitely see that. Like, there really wasn't a space for a set like Foundations, with them really ramping up a lot of like the Universes Beyond stuff, ramping up a lot of the side projects like the Jumpstart, because Jumpstart came out right around that time.
Yes, that's why OG Jumpstart is still so sought after by some people.
Yeah, there's still like a lot of really good cards in that set. You know, a lot of really good reprints came out of that set too. I mean, Ristic Study was in the OG.
Sylvala, Mono Green Sylvala was in there.
Yeah.
She's so good.
That's introduce like a thought to you to the table, especially with like the most recent Jumpstart set we saw. So you saw Scythe Cat Club get printed in Jumpstart.
Really good card.
You saw as an elf lover who would love to play elves in standard, like Dionysus.
Yes.
Do you think Jumpstart cards should be allowed into a standard format?
I am surprised that they weren't already, because I remember that's how it was when they brought back Jumpstart with every set. They were just standard cards.
Right.
But they were just packaged in a cheaper form factor that you're supposed to be able to have fun with playing.
I got a point on that one, but I'll let you finish your thought.
So when they introduced the Foundations Jumpstart, and they're like, oh, some of these, anything that's unique to this is not standard legal. Because does it jump straight to Modern with those, or does it go straight to Commander? Like it's just outside
straight to Modern.
Straight to Modern?
Yeah,
okay.
Modern and Commander have pretty much the same rules when it comes to
As far as
set
cards.
legality.
Well, because I know there have been a few examples where they're like, yep, this just completely avoids everything.
So the point I was going to make on that was, you got to remember, originally they had those what were they called, the packs,
like the promo packs?
No, it was the
like the guild pack type things.
Kind of. It was the somebody's going to rip me apart in the comments about it. It was the ones where you could like go to the big box stores and you could buy a pack of Magic cards that was specifically, I want these white cards from this one, or I want these red cards, or there's a when the Neon Dynasty came out, they were still doing them. There was one that was like the 5-color ninja deck or something.
Oh.
That you could like grab. Those are not ninjas.
I've always called them guild kits because I remember them being prevalent
they were
during
called
Ravnica.
Something else. They were called something else, and I think they were like theme packs.
Theme boosters.
Theme boosters, right?
Yes.
So they had the theme boosters. When Jumpstart, what was it, 2020?
Yes, that was
Jumpstart
the
was the first one. Yeah. So Jumpstart 2020, when that came out, the popularity of that product was so high because people were like, "Oh, we're getting reprints of older cards that we haven't seen in a while.
A bunch of new stuff.
We're getting a bunch of new stuff, and everything in here is going to be Commander legal, so we can run these in all of our Commander decks because Commander was super popular at the time."
What was it? Muxus, the Red Goblin, came
Right.
out in the original Jumpstart. Emil the Blessed, the Unicorn.
Yeah.
Like some staple Commander cards for their strategies came out in that Jumpstart.
In that set. So the fact that did so well, and then the next set they didn't make any Jumpstart cards, or they didn't they were like, "Oh, we're gonna do this because it's 2020." 2021 comes around, nothing new, right? And people are like, "Well, where's the Jumpstart stuff? We want to do that again. That was fun." Theme boosters were not doing well. They were not selling well at all because they were a bunch of garbage. I mean, let's be real about it. It was a lot of garbage stuff in those, like very, very, very basic strategies that you as a new player
could pick up and
learn the game.
I was about to say, so I think that's the thing that theme boosters had, is that it was a product that didn't know what its audience was supposed to be.
Right.
It wasn't enough cards for a new player because a new player would just go buy a starter deck or a pre-con commander deck, whatever.
The little starter battle decks.
But for an established player, you don't want only cards of one color most of the time. You're buying a pack to see what you get, and because you're trying to bolster your collection already.
Right.
And if you've been playing for long enough, you probably have multiple decks. They're not all the same color.
Well,
you need different pieces.
And not to mention, you were spending like $20 on these things and getting like one rare card out of it.
I think they were I think they were at a big box store. I think they were $10 a pack, and you got like 20 or 30 cards with guaranteed one rare chance at I think 2 or 3,
something like that.
Which I think so it was like the proto idea, like the inklings of ideas for how play boosters eventually worked. With the multiple rares, or I guess set boosters before that.
Set boosters.
With the chance at multiple rares and stuff.
Well, set boosters were around during that. Set boosters were around during that because that was like Kaldheim, and just previous to that was like when the first like collectors and whatnot did come out.
Well, because
they did like
first
standard
collectors was like around Coria, Eldraine?
Throne of Eldraine was the very first collector boosters.
Yeah.
Because I did research on it the other day because they sold this big Garuk box thing that they made a huge big deal about, and it came with like 3 collector boosters in it. I think it was like a $200 box.
Right.
That's insane.
Yeah, but then collector boosters were cool because you had never seen them before, and they were making the big deal out of the alt arts out of that set. Like, they made sense then. If it had been a one-off thing that like they just pick one set a year and be like, hey, this one's getting collector boosters because it has a really cool alt art, or we're doing some sort of Universes Beyond collaboration like Ikoria with the Godzilla cards, that would make sense.
Great use of Universes Beyond.
Yes, that's one of my favorite ones.
And that's the thing too, is like I've never had an issue with the cards like that. The special guest cards is what they're calling them now, where you get a collector booster, you crack it open, and you get a Jurassic Park card. You get, the Godzilla cards, which are like cards that are already in the set. Now, not the Jurassic Park ones, obviously, but like cards that were already in the set with like an alternate art or a
reskin.
A reskin, basically. Those kinds of Universes Beyond stuff, I don't think anybody had an issue with, because it's like I can still play with the regular versions of the cards, unless you're that one Godzilla. I think there was one Godzilla card that actually was not printed in the regular set.
It was
like
the Buy a Box promo one.
It was like a Space Godzilla or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the specific.
I thought it was the red-green one.
It was the red-green
Buy
one.
a Box.
It was the red-green one that was a Buy a Box that did not actually have a regular version of the card in the set.
Because they swore up and down, they're like, it's going to come out eventually, which it did years later.
And so I guess this is kind of like transitioning into the topic of Universes Beyond and its effect on Magic.
I love Fortnite.
Fortnite, the card game.
It's the Fortniteification. I think Spice A-Rack is the one that said that originally, and it's always been what is stuck in the back of my mind as the only way to describe where Magic has gone, where it is really just a catch-all for everything. Because initially, what was the first time that we ever saw Magic crossover with anything in the TCG?
So
Dungeons and Dragons.
I think the
I think
first
before that.
the first one I can think of was The Walking Dead. Was the first
that was the Secret Lair.
That was
Secret
the
Lair.
And there was a
kinda
huge drama over that. I
yeah.
remember
Because
the
there was
Meltdown was legendary.
There was no intent to make in-universe copies of The Walking Dead.
And if you didn't buy that Secret Lair, there was no way to get those cards.
Exactly.
Which is why all those cards like shot through the roof.
Yes, I remember Rick was like $200, $300.
Which, well, be fair, Rick eventually did get reprinted in what was it, Innistrad? One of the Innistrad sets.
I think it was
Yes, it was. I think it was Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow.
Yeah,
Between the two,
two.
they reprinted all of those.
Yep.
But that was still years later.
Right. Many years later.
Yes. But I think even before that, the first time we technically saw a Universes Beyond was, of all things, they did the My Little Pony. It was like a Make-A-Wish
The My Little
promo
Pony,
thing.
you also had the
They were
Transformer
silver
ones.
borders, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were silver bordered, so they were not legal, but they were physical cards printed.
Right.
Because that's around the time they did the Sword of Dungeons and Dragons as well.
Yep.
That was our first touch at we could do a D&D.
Well, and that was the thing, is that when Hasbro basically took over Wizards, when they bought Wizards out and they started, Hasbro has so many different IPs.
Yeah.
And it made sense, kind of, like the idea that Hasbro has Transformers. They have, D&D now.
Yeah.
Things like that. They could go, okay, cool, we own this. Let's make some cards. Let's make
throw
some
some
Magic
stuff
cards
at it.
for it. And the fact that the newer Transformer cards being special cards that you can get out of the set and the collectors in the set from Brothers War, or the fact that we had a whole standard set that was the D&D set.
The first one.
The first one, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms.
Yep.
That was fine. That was a Universes Beyond kind of, but it's still
within
under
the
the
same
Hasbro,
universe.
under the Hasbro licenses.
Well, and here's the thing. It was high fantasy blending with high fantasy. That's why Lord of the Rings didn't feel very weird.
Misplaced.
Yeah, because it's Magic was obviously very heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings already.
Yeah,
So,
Dungeons and Dragons was heavily influenced.
Yeah, so
and
it was-
then Dungeons and Dragons heavily influenced Magic, and it's
yeah.
just
So
the
it's just one of those
trickle-down
things
effect.
where. So when we saw that set, it was okay, it didn't feel different. None of the cards. I have to remind myself that it's a Lord of the Rings card if it's not a named character, right?
Yeah.
Orcish Bowmasters could have come out in any set and felt fine.
If that
Any
was not in Lord
Dominaria
of the
set.
Yeah, if it wasn't Lord of the Rings, I would say Orcish Bowmasters is an in-universe Magic card. If I didn't know better,
I could easily have seen that being printed in a Dominaria, some Dominaria set, or I don't know, like an Innistrad or whatever. Like it doesn't. The flavor of it, maybe not Innistrad, because I don't think we've ever seen orcs on Innistrad,
but yeah,
but you know what I mean.
I get what you're saying.
It fits very in universe, until you start getting to the cards like Gollum or the One Ring or Sauron or whatever. But even then, they're still high fantasy characters.
Yes. Now, on the polar opposite to the high fantasy that we love, let's talk about SpongeBob. Or Spider-Man.
I would say because SpongeBob is one of those, it's a secret layer.
Mm-hmm.
Secret layers are always meant to be those little, like, side, tongue-in-cheek kind of things, like special versions, special art, special artists, things like that. Those, I mean, I know a lot of people had a problem with them. Yep. I didn't care.
The only time I ever had a problem was when the Walking Dead one came out, and they were like, yep, if you don't buy this, you're never getting these cards. Plain and simple. It put a true sense of FOMO on it. It was not reflective of Magic's philosophy going, like, up to that point.
Were those modern legal?
They were. They don't think they were modern. I think they were straight to command. They were commander only.
The commander, or were they also like legacy?
I guess everything falls
under legacy is all in.
Legacy is all in.
Legacy is truly so. If it's commander, it's also legacy.
Basically.
Legacy and vintage.
Yeah.
But,
legacy and commander basically are the same kind of rules when it comes to like set legality.
But yeah, so that's all that was. But still, they drummed up so much hype for it too. Was I think one of their other fatal flaws.
Yeah.
Because they were hinting, they're like, "Ooh, we're gonna do this. It's the first time Magic's ever done this." Like. This way, that wasn't like a Comic-Con promo or something like something that the general public can just get a hold of.
Exactly.
And that's where I think a lot of the bad blood came from, and it left a poor taste in people's mouths even up till today. You still have people that are very upset when they see these different secret layers, and even then, SpongeBob got under my skin a little bit, just because it's tonally dissonant, right? Mm-hmm. It's like I can still go, sure, whatever. It is just a reprint of a pre-existing card. But when I'm sitting down to the game at a certain point, you almost feel like you're playing with proxies.
I agree.
Yeah.
But it's a legal card. And it's a complicated feeling, right?
And so don't get me wrong. My overall opinion, I know you guys talked a little bit about lore before I got here, so I missed some of that conversation.
Yeah, we touched on it.
I believe Wizards has an amazing universe.
Yes.
They have established characters, amazing worlds. Mm-hmm. I don't think they should rely on other IPs to make their universe amazing, because it already is.
Right.
Now, I'm also the person that when I saw the Hatsune Miku Secret Lair, I needed 4 counterspells for my modern deck, but
again, that's a secret lair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I even say what I've said, but I am setting aside money every week to prepare for Final Fantasy to come out because I'm a diehard Final Fantasy fan. And I'm sure someone will argue that, Final Fantasy, depending on what game you're pulling from, fits the Magic universe to some extent. Even 7 now with Neon Dynasty.
Yeah.
It fits. It's still, it's a high, I'd say it's a low fantasy. It's like a low fantasy
it's
sci-fi
high
setting.
Fiction.
Yeah, because it has the sci-fi elements, but it's Magitech, so it's weird. But
so my opinion on everything, and I'm the negative fucking Nancy over here, but essentially, I agree with what you were saying. You know, it was unnecessary. It's unnecessary for Magic to rely on these outside IPs coming in. You know, sure, it's neat every once in a while to get a Magic version of some of your favorite characters from whatever other IP. You know, it was cool to see Captain America being able to fling equipment around and have it reattached to him. You know, that was
cool.
Fun.
Yeah.
Same thing with like Iron Man being that like our artifact focused leader and whatnot, or commander. But that should be relegated to like secret layers. And if they want to reprint those or want to print those, they should stick with the idea of we're going to print this as an in-universe card down the road. Like, if they stuck with what they had said that they were going to stick with that whole 6-month thing where they're like, okay, we're going to make this secret layer, and then 6 months later, we're going to actually put those cards in the set.
In a standard or at least an in-universe set.
In-universe version of the cards in the set. They didn't. They did, I think, a handful of them. I think recently we got the Street Fighter cards.
Yes.
Yep.
We saw
Before that,
Stranger
we got the
Things.
Stranger Things cards, and then we finally got the Walking Dead one some 5 years later.
Yeah, I think as far as like most recent release as far as Secret Lairs, and I think the last one they did to invert in-universe versions for the Magic universe was Street Fighter.
Right.
Yes.
After Street Fighter, they have not reprinted any Secret Lair specific things.
Right. So things like the Deadpool set that just came out, we're probably not going to see that, if ever, for a while.
Yes.
And I'm like, I agree. Like, you have such good lore, you have such good storytelling capabilities. You've been doing this for 30 years. You guys have experience. People probably have retired from working at Wizards before some people even started playing the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have so many different planes that we know about, but we've never been to.
Yes.
So many stories that they could tell us. Like, when was the last time we went to Chandelar?
Lorwyn.
When was the last time we went to Lorwyn?
Well, that got pushed back
Yeah.
so that we could do another Secret Lair.
Right.
Not another universe, to be honest. I think because it got bumped for Spider-Man, right?
I think so. if I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
correctly.
They
So
bumped it.
you've got Final Fantasy coming out,
Mhm.
which I like Final Fantasy. I like the IP, but at the same time, they have their own game. They don't need to be in Magic.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because Final Fantasy has its own well-established TCG.
Mm-hmm.
Like the game that TCG has been going for about a decade at this point. Like it has legs. It's been going, and then they made this deal, which of course Magic is Magic, right?
Right.
It is
The
30
biggest
plus
card game.
years.
It is
of-
literally the biggest card game in the world.
You know, so of course it's not unreasonable to think that they were like, oh well, it's mutually beneficial at that point, right?
Sure.
And because Magic is still trying to boost their foothold in Asia
Mm-hmm.
as a whole, because Magic over there, if I'm not mistaken, is very much just a collector thing. It's like how Pokemon here is
Mhm.
here in the West, where you have a lot more collectors than players.
There's a lot of Poke players from the States.
There are, but comparatively,
Yes, I'd agree. I'd say their Pokemon leagues over there get intense.
yes.
Mhm.
And I mean, and I say that, but there's still a lot of great Pro Tour players that have come from Japan
Sure.
and other parts of Asia, but predominantly collectors over there. You don't see stores set up the same way. They actually say a lot of the time, if you are a big time like legacy vintage collector, go over to Japan, you'll find cards at steep discounts comparatively.
Oh, so like prime example for a recent purchase for a brand new card, Ugin out of the new set.
Yes.
Huge fan of the Ghostfire foil. Not going to get the textured foils; those are way too expensive. But for those that did not know, they released a Japanese printing of the Ghostfire foils in the main set.
Really?
You could probably find the Japanese Ugin Ghostfire foil for about $40 to $50 cheaper than you can find the English one.
Which is huge, because I think the English one right now is what? I think 400 was last I saw, or is it now dropped down a little
So not
to like
the
300?
edge foil. So the Ghostfire foil got down to about 120. It might have dropped a little bit more.
Oh,
since
not
then.
the hollow foil.
Not the super textured
Okay.
foil one.
No. Okay.
Just the regular Ghostfire foil. I found on TCG like low listings for the Japanese version of the card, $60.
Which is reasonable.
Yeah.
Especially if
I
you know what
mean-
the card does.
$60 for a single card is burgeoning that reasonable price tag. But at the
you're
same
also
time,
talking like a chase foil.
right,
card.
is a
Yes.
chase special foil like
Yes.
Whamadine chocolatey covered, super awesome.
Yeah, it's
I get
different when it's $60 for the alternate art as
Right.
opposed to the regular printing of the card is $60.
Exactly.
Think, Shieldred. Shieldred is I think gonna be probably our last example for a while of a normal printing of a card just skyrocketing.
Skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Because Shelly, when I think even now, just a regular Shelly is probably sitting around the $60 range.
Yes,
And that is just a regular non-foil,
Yeah.
nothing fancy,
Yep.
Shoulder of the Apocalypse.
Yeah, I had a showcase that I traded in the store, and it was sitting around like 80 to 90.
yeah,
Yep.
and
And I
that's a
traded it
draw
in.
because I remember when Shelly first came out, a regular one was 90 to 100.
Yeah, I cracked one
You
into
know?
my pre-release kit for that set.
Yeah.
Oh, I've moved so many Shellys. Like, I've maintained my super pretty ones, but like any of the normal ones I've got, it's just traded away.
Yep,
Yeah.
trade it away. It's
And
great.
people
trade
still
fodder.
want it.
Yeah, it's a good card. It is.
Regardless
Four
in
drop, 4
Commander
5.
or 60 cards,
Right.
Sheldred is an amazing card.
She still stays playing Standard and Pioneer. If you're playing Black, not nearly as much as she used to.
She's kind of dropped to like the 2 to maybe a 3 of in the 60 card formats that she's relevant.
But you're still talking about almost $200 on.
2 cards.
Yeah.
Right.
That's insane.
But to circle back to the Universes Beyond stuff. I really am not a fan of the idea that the Universes Beyond stuff is going to be standard legal now, because you're talking about Spider-Man, the Green Goblin, and he's a goblin, which makes no sense.
Yeah, I think they're using the Amazing Spider-Man, which I think the set is called Amazing Spider-Man.
Sure.
Also, I see some comments here because I pulled them up on my phone.
Oh, good, because I don't have them pulled up on here.
You see, that's why I did that. I'm on top of things sometimes. We have someone, It's Secrets, was asking if we are big into Modern. They live in Waycroft, and they're thinking about going to our store to play more.
So we've had, I think, 2 Modern RCQs here now?
Yeah.
I think it was last season.
Well, we did a Pioneer one, and then we did a Modern one.
Yes.
Yep. So Modern is definitely something that likes to get played down here. I am an Eldrazi player, and then Orzhov Blink. They're both amazing strategies. I'm glad that Underworld Breach is no longer in the format, because that was probably one of the most cancerous decks I've ever had to play.
It was just a matter of time, though.
I mean, that's
Everyone
just a
knew it
cancerous
was coming.
card,
It's
really.
just like One Ring. Everyone was sitting there holding their breath, like, when is the hat gonna drop? When are they finally gonna say enough is enough with this card?
Yeah. And to my surprise, I thought there was a couple other contenders that could have been banned in Modern, or even probably seen something brought back. Like out of the Eldrazi package, I think Sowing Mycospawn could have been banned, because that card, especially like when you curve into Sowing Mycospawn, into Kick Sowing Mycospawn, into Kick Sowing Mycospawn, it is almost impossible to recover from pretty much being Stone Rain 2 turns in a row.
Yeah, like you're just kind of stuck.
Yep. And overall, like talking about like the post-ban format for Modern. Obviously, all of the Breach players are gone, and it seems like a majority of people have kind of drifted back to Boros Energy as just one of those standard strategies that is going to maintain and be good. Blink is definitely fallen off. I think it is still a good deck. It definitely, you take some of your 4-of slots and add a little bit more tech for some different matchups. The list that I'm actually interested to try out is Dimir kind of control, but utilizing Kaido, Bane of Monsters, which is a very popular card.
Very
standard
good card.
And then obviously you got to play the best. My favorite Planeswalker, Tameo, in all forms. Doesn't matter which one. But you kind of get this weird mid-game kind of grindy tempo list with some counter magic and removal playing in that Dimir shell. And then obviously for those that love giant tentacle monsters, all hail Emrakul, the Promised Mother. Just going big and hitting people hard. Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much my go-to strategy for most card games. Just I'm gonna play dudes and I'm gonna turn them sideways and I'm gonna hit you in the face with them.
And it feels really good when you're playing big Eldrazi that are hitting you for, anywhere from, on the low end, 8, high end 15. It's fun. Yeah. And especially when you're playing the big, Eldrazi Titans, even in their new forms. I mean, God, the new Ulamog.
Nasty.
Ulamog is
powerful. The new Ulamog was amazing in Gorios Reanimator. The fact that you have Solitude as an option to pitch just the Atraxa out of your hand as a 7 CMC spell. Ulamog in the graveyard, Gorios Reanimate comes in with 7+1/+1 counters, haste, and Annihilator 7. Just backbreaking.
Yes.
But yes, we do have a Modern crowd down here for those up in Waycross, Georgia.
Yeah, I know. And I've always said, and we've talked about this before, I'm always trying to drum up our 60 card formats here, because I love Commander, but I started with 60 card. Really, I started with limited, but I've accepted that getting drafts to go here is difficult. So I will settle with my 60 card. I like seeing Standard. I like seeing Pioneer. I really wish we had a Pioneer RCQ this year.
Honestly, I think that really kind of killed the whole Pioneer.
Killed the drive-in around here a little bit.
Right. It really did kill the drive, because they were like, because everybody was like, oh, Pioneer. They really liked it. I mean, it's kind of like Modern Light.
Yeah, it's a cheaper Modern.
It's a cheaper Modern, and it's not as, I would almost venture to say it's not as toxic, because there's a lot more curated bans in Pioneer.
And the ban list for Pioneer is specifically made to keep it from being something like Modern. Modern is a very fast-paced, very interactive.
Yes.
As opposed to Pioneer, you get a lot of different brews and deck options that you don't have to play like the best 3 decks in the format to have a competitive list.
Yeah, I brewed together Golgari Elves. Because
you were doing those with the
Lathril-
venerated rot priest, right? That you were doing that.
I also did that one, but that was
Yes.
that was
standard.
Cynic.
Or was that? I thought it was a standard list as well.
That
actually.
was no, that was a pioneer list.
That was a pioneer list.
And then the standard list I put together was the mono red mice, just because it was the easiest one to put together, and we had pretty much everything I needed for it.
Because I remember working with you, I put together that Naya Convoke list for Pioneer.
Yep, because that was right when I think Duskborn came out, and we had the new Wanderer, and we thought it was going to be super busted.
Yeah, I still will play it on Arena occasionally, and it will get people because you drop Wanderer, and then it's Ancient Imperiosaur, and then it's like, cool, hexproof on top of the ward already, and this thing is massive.
Yeah. Because
I've been playing my Resolute Reinforcements and all sorts of other things that just feed into a Convoke package. Mm-hmm. So I'm dropping a 16/16 Trample Ward 2 with hexproof now.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, when they announced that they were not going to be doing Pioneer this year, they were just going to go standard modern for the RCQs.
And then I think you hit Pioneer like in the fall of this year, so like towards the tail end of the holidays.
Right. They finally were like, okay, we'll throw one Pioneer at you guys. But it's like that really, like when they made that announcement, that really killed the drive for people to build those Pioneer decks, and we were right on the cusp of getting an actual like Pioneer going.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, oh, well, never mind. We're gonna focus on modern now, or we're gonna focus on standard. And then even most of the standard players just stopped coming because every time they would show up, the only thing everybody wanted to play was Commander.
So I've considered trying to put it on a different dedicated night, but that's where,
I'd say Friday is really like everyone talks about Friday Night Magic.
And
There's a reason
game
that it
store
holds
stuff.
that title.
Yeah.
It's hard to get people to come out to the game store during the week because you get off of work and you normally just want to go home and relax.
Example, like normally I get off earlier than I did today, but like I got off and I got home. I maybe took 2 seconds to change, and then I got the text message. I was like, "Oh shoot, I forgot!" And I immediately
you were
left to
like
come
down
here.
here.
Yeah.
That's the thing is like I accounted for that because I know that when we had initially talked about having you on, you were like, "I might be a little late." I'm like, "That's fine. Like we'll start off with talking about other stuff, so then we can transition into this," which it worked out.
Yeah.
That's why we make plans, right? But to circle one last time onto the Universes Beyond thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think Wizards is going to learn, and I think that this is a big learning process for them because, they have to deal with keeping investors and Hasbro happy and everyone. Right. They're going to have to find their happy medium where they're not bumping standard sets that are in Universe for Universes Beyond, but I don't think we're going to see a true reduction in Universes Beyond at this point. It's proven too lucrative.
Yeah.
The average player loves it too much. I mean, if you look at sales numbers, every Universes Beyond sells like crazy.
The best-selling Magic set of all time is Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Universes Beyond.
100%.
And with the way people are talking about Final Fantasy, it's going to be trying to usurp that because I get phone calls every single day of people asking if pre-orders are open. They want to get a hold of something. I need something, anything. Like, I think that set's going to blow up, and if that won't be a sign to them to just keep.
Have you seen the premiums? So obviously MH3, the collector decks.
Yes.
Have you seen the premiums that are on the Final Fantasy collector decks?
I mean, MSRP for those decks is about $150 a piece. If you look at the secondary market,
which is $50 higher than the MH3
ones, yes. But I figured they would be because again they're paying the additional tax because of Square Enix.
Right. They have to pay for the IP.
Yes, and Square Enix is not a cheap company.
They are not.
They're big. They're big. They're one of the biggest companies that they've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Because Final Fantasy is, I think, a top 10 property, like of especially video gaming property.
Yeah,
I'd agree. It has a huge market stake.
Disney.
Yeah, and Sanrio and Pokemon.
Hey, we got Marvel. That's Disney.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
People have talked about that opening the door to more Disney stuff, but
I would not be surprised if the Spider-Man set ends up being higher MSRPs because they have to pay Marvel, they have to pay Disney for
spoiler
the
alert, it is higher MSRP because we can already see it. It's already up for pre-order through distributors, but MSRP for that is it's not as bad as Final Fantasy, but it's still definitely elevated.
Right.
The last Universe Beyond thing I want to talk about is Avatar: The Last Airbender coming around the holidays.
Yeah, it's supposed to come out I think November.
Yes.
So.
Oh, Nick, you don't seem happy about that one.
Avatar, I'm so torn with Avatar because In terms of their technology, it feels high fantasy-esque, but it's definitely more of like an Eastern high fantasy. So
it's Kamigawa.
Yeah, or closer to like Khans, because it feels a lot more like Mongolia, China inspired.
Well,
Like
each one of the nations is inspired by a different Asian culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, can it work? Yes. It's all about execution.
Is it confirmed as a standard set?
I think it's.
If it is a Universes Beyond set, they have already said that Spider-Man?
If it's
Spider-Man's going to
starting
be
with
the
Final
first.
Fantasy.
Is it going to be Final
I think
Fantasy? Because
Final
I
Fantasy
heard
is
it was
going
supposed to be
standard.
Spider-Man.
Final Fantasy is going to be
So
standard.
Final Fantasy is going to be
So
the
you gotta
first one.
fling those 9,999 cactuses at people.
Right. So that's going to be standard legal, and then from that set forward, all Universes Beyond sets will be standard legal.
Yes.
So if that is going to be a Universes Beyond set, not a
Secret Lair.
modern or a secret layer thing specifically, then yes, it will be standard legal. Which like I said, I'm not a fan of, honestly.
Yeah, I think that is one of my big things. Is I don't like it being in standard, because standard was always like that. Hey, the wider Magic stuff, yeah, you can have whatever. But when we're talking standard, we're talking Magic. This is Magic the Gathering. This is their universe. These are their characters. You know, you're always going to be playing your Elspeths, your Ugin, Karn, Chandra, Jace. You know, these characters that you've grown up with at this point while playing the game are going to be here and prevalent. And so it starts to feel weird, because then the story gets left on these cliffhangers.
I know you guys talked about the story a little bit, and I hope we get back to it. Maybe give me a quick recap. But I feel like, as far as not to kind of put the dead horse to rest, is Universes Beyond is a great like supplemental product that we can include in like secret layers as a little splash of something to just spice things up, but it should not be in standard.
The focus. It should not be a focal point.
I agree.
I definitely agree with that statement.
Because, yeah, and I mean, I'll transition into a little bit of lore talk for a second. So I think we're wrapping up the story to Tarkir Dragonstorm. I think we have one more story left to go.
Yeah.
The last one might have come out already. I don't remember. I'll be 100% honest about that. Once that story is concluded, we're not going to get anything new for it for like 6 months.
Because it's what is it? It's the space theme set.
Edge of Eternities.
Edge of Eternities.
Yes.
Because what is it? It's Final Fantasy's the next set.
Yep.
Yes.
And then
Spider-Man.
Then
Edge of Eternities.
So we're getting 2 Universes Beyond sets back to back
before
we get an actual Magic set.
And you know what I find the kicker to be about that? This was probably one of the best like culminations of actual Magic story we've had in almost a year.
Because they're finally finding their footing with. Because I was just telling him, I gave the broad strokes of like every Magic story can be summed up, or at least like post Phyrexia stuff. It can be summed up as
side quests.
X is using the Omen paths. We need to stop it.
Yeah.
Because that's OTJ is where it really kicked off with that. I feel like where it was, we were introduced to the whole concept of Jason Vraska wanting to destroy the Omen paths. They basically just became like eco-terrorists. I don't know how to put it, because they were like,
that's a great way to phrase it.
These Omen paths are ruining the ecosystems of all the different planes. It's making planeswalkers not special anymore. We have to fix that. Not everyone can be trusted with the ability to visit other planes. Which, considering what Rakdos and all of them got up to in that set, okay, maybe they're not 100% wrong, because there's a lot of people causing problems on planes. You also have these multiversal threats now that were contained, like Valgavoth, who, you know, otherwise would have just been stuck on Duskmourn, and now is a persistent threat. Even he's been dealt with for now, but he was not completely dealt with.
Talking about multiversal threats, the return of one of the OG big bads, Nicol Bolas.
Which I had to go back and reread because I missed that part. I missed it initially, like reading through everything. I went, wait, they said Bolas isn't in the meditation realm anymore. Yeah. Where is he?
And so that's why I think he may come into a factor in the Edge of Eternities, but the fact is, one of the biggest villains in Magic history is no longer being contained by his brother.
Yeah.
all of the chaos and havoc that can ensue from his just simple existence of being.
You know what he reminds me of? And spicy opinion. He reminds me of the Joker. The Joker is one of the most boring Batman villains ever. He's the longest running Batman villain, right? We have seen him in every friggin' iteration, and it seems like every new Batman series, eventually the Joker shows up and he's the bad guy. I feel like it's Lex Luthor to Superman. It is this overdone, overhyped thing. Don't get me wrong. Individual stories about the character.
The finger up,
I know you want to go off. You want to go off. I know you do. Shut up.
Say your piece so I can say mine.
I think there can be individual stories about the character that are good. I think over the entire course of the series, and like I said, I understand this is a spicy opinion. I don't like the Joker as being this long-term Batman villain. I do not like the idea that we have spent so long dealing with Nicobolas, being the overarching mustache-twirling villain, destroying planes just to get back his power, because it's the same story over and over and over and over again. And we finally had a bookend for it, and they wanted to go, we're going to just take that, and we're going to put this right in our back pocket, and, oh, look, he's back!
What I will agree with you on with Bolus is I think that they've pulled the trigger a little too early. Because even though War of the Spark now was
2019.
So it hasn't even been, it's been 6 years.
It's been right around 6 years.
6 years is a long time, guys.
Think about how long it took to tell the Phyrexia story.
So Phyrexia's been told since like the beginning of Magic Lore.
Yes, and they finally resolved it.
And they finally dealt
did
with
we
it.
really though?
No, because it's the same thing.
It's
the
still
same
back
thing.
pocketed.
It's the same thing. It's like they're like, okay, cool, we finished with that, but we're just gonna take this little piece, just gonna take this piece, just piece, put it right in our back pocket, and because in like 3 years we're gonna be like, bam, they're back.
It'll be, they figured out how to undo the being stuck in
They figured out how to phase back into
themselves
reality.
Yeah, they phased back in, or someone phased them in.
And then it'll be like this whole new like Phyrexian plane or something.
Or they'll be like, they actually affected Teferi with it, but it was on delay and it took 20 years for it to kick in.
Some oil was infected. One of the planeswalkers they cured still had a little piece of infection in him.
And figures out how to pull them back into the story.
And so one of the reasons I bring this specific point up as far as Bolus being back is ever since, Aftermath, pretty much once the invasion of Phyrexia was done, the Phyrexians were dead. Woo! Magic has lacked like a single unifying thread.
Yes,
like you've had all of these random side stories of we went to this place, we went to this place. But really, like, the closest you get to a bad guy is Jace just doing questionable things.
Yeah, because he's not even doing inherently evil things, but he's just currently diametrically opposed to Chandra and Nissa and whoever our heroes for the set seem to be.
Yep.
And it's funny because you bring that up because that was what started our whole conversation about lore is I said, Magic doesn't have a villain right now. Like you said, it is side quests. It's, oh, hey, let's go check up on these guys. Oh, hey, let's go check up on these guys. And they have their, like, villain of the week. You have your Valgavoth that, sure, if he was left unchecked, would become a bigger problem.
You know what it reminds me of? Scooby-Doo All-Stars.
It is Scooby-Doo.
Where literally it's a small core group of repeated characters with the celebrity of the week showing up to deal with the villain of the week's problem. Like when they have the Globetrotters show up. Or Batman and Robin show up. Or the WWE guys.
Great moments.
Like,
but
Scooby-Doo and Kiss.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think more on, like... Because Tarkir, our main villain isn't... Like, there isn't a single dragon that they're like, oh, this is the one we gotta stop.
Right.
It's just... Sarkhan is against them.
And Dragon Storms are becoming a problem.
Yes, and they're threatening to spill out into the multiverse again through the Omen Path.
Which you got through the tail end of the Aetherdrift story.
Yeah, yes. And honestly, I feel like there is a design space for that kind of story to be told, where it's not necessarily an overarching villain. It is a universal threat that needs to be dealt with. And like we were talking about before, I really like, and like I said, we talked about this at length, I really like the idea of an overarching theme, like an overarching thread that connects all a bunch of sets together, like they used to do with like blocks and things like that, where something, sure, Bolus was the longest example of it.
Where's
Phyrexians
Bolus
was the
in this
longest,
one?
But it's like, that's what I mean. Like I'd said, like the reboot of Doctor Who, where
Yes.
every episode is a self-contained episode, but there's always an element that like links them all together. And then when you get to the last one, it's like, oh,
everything
something that was just in the background. I mean, it's the Bad Wolf storyline
Yes.
from the reboot. You know,
Yeah.
the fact that you kept seeing the words Bad Wolf everywhere. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody focused on it. The camera focused on it, but it was there. Everywhere you went, there was always the mention of Bad Wolf. And then when you get to the very last episode of that first reboot season, you realize there's a reason why it's been there the whole time, because it was a major plot point for that last episode. I actually like stories like that, where there's this thread that just keeps showing up throughout the entire thing. Maybe it's not focused on, but you could have like these little threads that just kind of link together, and then when you get to like this last set at the end of a year or the end of 2 years or something like that, you can be like, hey, bam, there's the thing. This is the thing.
I almost compare it to the return of the Phyrexians, like in All Will Be One.
Right.
Is how you saw Jin Kataxis and his machinations on Kamigawa.
Right.
Vorin Klex you found on Kaldheim.
On Kaldheim.
Yes. And Urbrask was on New Capenna. Because everyone forgets about that one, because New Capenna was not a well-liked set.
Right. I mean...
I feel like New
But see,
Capenna doesn't get enough credit.
It had a lot of Ledger Shredder. Like, come on. Like, it has good stuff.
If they did more like that, I think that would have been cooler. I think they handled the Phyrexian storyline a lot better than they handled the whole Nicobolus being defeated at the end of War of the Spark. Like, I really felt like it was better handled, because it was like, I remember cracking open those packs of Kaldheim and then seeing Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. I'm like, what in the flying... Why is this guy here?
Yeah. And you go,
We have
what?
not heard nor seen anything from them since New Phyrexia.
Yeah.
And suddenly, like, how is he on Kaldheim? They're not planeswalkers. They have no way to get there. How is he there? And then that little taste, that little hint here and there, like, oh, well, maybe, we saw Tezzeret. Okay. Planar Bridge. There you go. That makes sense.
And then
that's why
Phyrexians
he's like,
aren't organic.
right.
They're inorganic materials. So
they're a combination of both.
But that's why Vorinclex was hunting so much, is because he had to shred off all of his organic material
and
to cross the
regrow
Blind
it.
Eternities. So, it's the little things like that.
Yes, that I think that's what they need to bring back. They should have some kind of overarching threat that we might get a hint of in a set, and then as we go through multiple sets, we might get one card that references that threat. Let them deal with the problem, and then when we get to a big set like Phyrexian All Will Be One, now it's all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, that's why they were doing all of this. That's why they were doing all this crap. That's why they got the seed. That's why,
Jin Kataxis was messing with spirits.
Messing with spirits.
And I think Edge of Eternities is going to be that big culmination set for us, because we've been getting these little seeds of Jason Vraska being up to something.
They're trapped in the meditation realm because Jace couldn't handle it.
Correct. But
so you literally had Jace being
busted
edgy for like 4 sets straight, not like developing the story, but also not really developing the story.
Yeah. Because they took the key to the vault from Loot.
Yep. Well, they took the key to the vault to get Loot out.
Yes,
from Thunder Junction.
Yes, that's what it was. Because Loot came out of there along with all the other dinosaurs and craziness. And then Loot just kind of got stuck with Chandra for some reason.
So
Is what I
they went to
gathered?
Duskmourn. Once they
all the Duskmourn stuff happens.
in Duskmourn, Loot got separated with what's his name, the blue flaming hair dude. Winter. So Loot was captured by Winter. That's why in the Aether Drift story, Loot is with Winter to help Winter try winning the Aether Split.
Right.
And throughout the race, Loot gets captured by, I think, like bandits or something like that, and Chandra goes to rescue him.
That's it.
And so that's how Loot ends up with Chandra. But then you get to that whole culmination at the end of Aether Drift of Jason Vraska reappearing, capturing Loot, and kind of leading into the whole Tarkir storyline.
Yes. So, I don't know. It's one of those things that I still think they're cooking. I think that there is going to be a culmination to all of this. and I hope that it will establish a bigger threat because the Fomori have been mentioned. They say the Fomori are pretty much gone and done with, but they could always reappear.
They're a race
They're
of
like
giants,
giants,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
That clearly had some insane technology with how the vault worked and everything. There have been mentions of other races that exist within the Blind Eternities besides just the Eldrazi.
No, we only need tentacle monsters. Nothing else.
You're so right. But, and it's called Edge of Eternities. This is a plane that exists at the edge
of the known universe.
And it's a space opera. So I think we'll learn a lot more about what exists in the Blind Eternities.
Magic's finally got its own Star Wars set.
Yes, I'm hoping it's more Gundam-esque, but it'll probably be Star Wars.
I was gonna say they will never beat the OG space opera.
But
Battle Among the Stars.
For once, I won't rush us to an ending. I will say we're getting close to about that time we normally like to wrap up.
We got about 10 minutes.
So, if there's anything anyone wants to talk about for those last few minutes, I open up the floor.
Okay.
Just any random off the wall.
Forgive my ignorance. So, what is Battle Among the Stars?
So basically, Star Wars came out in the 70s.
Okay.
Right around the same time. I believe it was a Japanese filmmaker that really liked Star Wars and created his own version of Star Wars.
Okay.
And called it Battle Among the Stars.
Oh.
Well, it's like Japan did that a lot because there's always the
Spider-Man. It is the cheesiest thing ever, and it's amazing, and I love it.
Well, have you seen Japanese Spider-Man?
No.
Yeah,
How he says, like, I'm an emissary from hell.
Yeah. No,
they referenced it in one of the recent Spider-Verse movies. It's really funny.
Wasn't it also like one that had like a mech suit or something?
That's Penny Parker. That's written by Marvel,
Okay.
but this was like a separate movie made by a Japanese director who just really liked Spider-Man, and he's fighting some basically a Power Rangers type villain,
Turkish
Super
Batman.
Sentai.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "I am Spider-Man, Spider-Man, an emissary of hell," and that's just what he was.
Yeah.
And they finally acknowledge it as a joke, haha, we know about this.
Mm-hmm.
Is he canon?
Yeah,
But
maybe.
it's a thing. But yeah, Japan has always done weird things with Western properties.
I mean,
But we do the same thing to their stuff.
the world has done weird things with Western properties. Like I said,
true.
Turkish Batman or Turkish Spider-Man or something like
Yeah.
that.
Well, it's before any of the Marvel movies started coming out, even the original early 2000s, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, there was some dude, I can't remember his name. He was the dude who was pegged to direct the original Spider-Man trilogy back in the early 2000s because he shot on his own personal camcorder. He shot this Spider-Man short film where this dude was literally doing stunts himself in New York City, tying bed sheets and swinging between buildings. Risking his life to do this.
Damn.
I'm sure someone may know about this more than I do, the
I was
details.
gonna say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I remember I watched a documentary talking about this, the early days of superhero films, because they've been trying to make movies like that since I think the 70s. Was people
I mean,
trying
Red
to
Brown
get it
was the
going.
original Captain America.
Yeah. And because we saw the Superman movies that came out in, what was it, the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
With
Christopher Reeves.
Christopher Reeves. I knew Reeves was the last name. I wanted to say Michael Reeves, and I'm
Yeah.
that's a YouTuber. That's
And,
completely wrong.
I find it funny that George Reeves was one of the first Superman,
Mhm.
the old black and white Superman, and then Christopher Reeves, completely different spelling, but weird
Yeah,
that it's the
same
same
name.
name.
Same name. But it's one of those things. And obviously, we've bastardized several of Japan's properties. Transformers is a big one.
Sure.
Very different. Yeah, and Transformers is all Power Rangers.
Well,
Super
yeah.
Sentai
Yeah.
Force, which is really just a pulling from Kamen Rider and
They had
there's
their
some
own
other series that I'm
Sentai
thinking.
Ranger.
yeah. But you
Force
say Super
shows.
Sentai, most people don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yep.
Because Godzilla's a big one.
Oh yeah, we know. We bastardized Godzilla pretty hardcore. That's a
use
lot
the
of fish.
Yeah, that's a lot. Oh my god, I will never forget. I think it's Final Wars, one of the last OG Toho Godzilla movies, where it's Godzilla just fighting like every big
Every
villain ever.
villain, yeah.
And at one point, he just absolutely bodies Zilla,
in
the
Sydney.
American one. Yeah, in Sydney, just instantly, just
like rips
demolished.
his jaw apart and
yeah,
friggin'
yeah, like
burns
it was
him.
no contest. It's absolutely no diff. But I don't know. It's one of those interesting things, I guess, with different properties. So, and that's why I was almost a little nervous with Final Fantasy at first being adapted into Magic, because it's very influenced by where it is written. There's a lot of bits of Final Fantasy that have a lot of nuances that, especially in the older games, the translations never really picked up on. But as we see these later games now, they're kind of having to go back and retroactively.
You spoony bard.
Like they have to retroactively talk about, like these ideas and like how the gods work and why it, it's different compared to a Western mindset.
Yeah.
And especially like the magic systems, and it's just weird translation things.
I'm
I
always
guess
for summons in Final Fantasy. Give me my Bahamut.
Yeah, right. Bahamut. I'm still a diehard Alexander. One of the coolest summons ever.
Yeah.
Knights of the Round.
Knights of the Round is also sick.
Yeah.
But all right.
Well, that's probably gonna be good enough to wrap us up. We got about 5 minutes left. So
we can take.
Appreciate you coming by.
Oh, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
It's been
thank
fun.
you. It has been fun. I always like having a guest. It's like because it's easier to converse at a certain point.
Well, especially now that we have,
Jump off really quick and deal with this phone call.
we see.
This is the story
I
I
knew
wanna tell my
this was gonna happen. This was gonna happen at least once. Usually what ends up happening is he gets called away like left, right, and center, and though recently we've worked it out so that we have somebody watching the desk while we're doing this for like the hour and a half we're doing this, but like those first couple of times it was just every time it seemed like every 5 minutes he was having to get up and
so
take care
you
of
just
stuff.
had the conversation
And I
with
just had to
yourself for a
carry the
little bit.
conversation by myself and
All
my
right.
audience.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, guys. We do not have sealed Pokemon product right
Yes,
now. That is what that phone
unfortunately,
call
we
is about.
sold out all
I
of
am
our
so
sealed
sold
Pokemon
out.
product.
How dare you guys?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Well-
man. It's hard.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to stick around. We're going to be doing a live stream of our premiere for our D&D show that's going to be released tonight. Tonight will be the first episode releasing, and then we're going to be releasing them once a week. So we've already got a couple episodes filmed, but this will be the first one premiering. So be sure to stick around for that at about 7 o'clock is when we're going to go ahead and start that.
I think that's going to be on YouTube, though.
Are we going to be doing it live on YouTube? Okay,
Yes.
so we'll be doing it on YouTube. So go over there. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all the latest video updates and uploads.
I was saying, if you're in the local area, we're going to have free food that's going to
We've
be
got
shown up any minute
all of
now.
this that you see behind us.
Yeah,
It's
look at all
literally
of this.
set up to be a movie-style premiere. So we're going to get popcorn. We've got pizza. Drinks are in our cooler.
What kind of drinks?
Non-alcoholic.
Non-alcoholic, unfortunately.
I know.
Although, not 25 feet that way
It's a bar.
is WePub. So
It's a great bar.
it
Check
is.
out.
It's a great place. We love
We love
WePub. So again, thank you for joining us. I'm Nick the Red. With
I'm-
me, as always, is
Tyler B, and we're also joined
and
by...
we're happy to have.
Dom.
All right. So see you guys next time.
Take it easy.